May 5th, 1915. It is a calm, warm, sunny day with partial cloud cover aboard the Lusitania. The previous day, on May 4th, after 3 days of cold, stormy weather, the sky cleared up, and the sun finally began to show. The temperatures had rose significantly, and the turbulent ocean began to finally calm. Throughout May 4th, many of the passengers aboard the Lusitania were recovering from their seasickness, and many others finally began spending their day outside, now that the conditions had improved. Finally, on May 5th, however, the turbulent sea had completely calmed, and it was now a warm and beautiful day. At approximately 11:50 a.m. that morning, the older Cunard steamship Saxonia, en route to New York from Liverpool, passed the Lusitania in close proximity. Passengers aboard the Saxonia lined her promenade railings to watch the Lusitania pass only a few hundred feet away from them. Amidst the cheering from both vessels, the two steamers blew their whistles at each other as a form of salute, then quickly overtook each other and sailed onwards. Captain Turner was on the bridge wing of the Lusitania as the Saxonia passed by. It was an eerie foreshadowing for Captain Turner, for as fate would have it, Turner would in just over a year be given command over Saxonia's near-identical sister ship, the Ivernia, in autumn of 1916. On New Year's Day of 1917, the Ivernia was carrying 2,400 troops when she was torpedoed and sunk in just about an hour. As the bridge of the Ivernia sank from beneath him, Captain Turner would end up surviving this second disaster, whereas 120 lives were not. By May 5th, conversations aboard the Lusitania had taken a darker turn. For a second time, talk of German submarines was once again widespread, though this time, it was a matter of serious discussion. The war zone was getting closer and apprehension crept in. In second class, passenger Alan Adams wrote that he had an unsettling dream that day. In his dream, he saw chaos unfold aboard the Lusitania, passengers running up and down the decks as submarines chased the ship. Amidst this chaos, he saw what seemed to be his friend, dead, and in a coffin. In his dream, he watched this friend rise up from his coffin and beckon Alan to come and join him. In spite of the intense paranoia some of the passengers felt, many others took the opportunity on this day to stroll her decks underneath the sun or relax in deck chairs. For the first time during this voyage, the veranda was filled with passengers, enjoying a drink while getting fresh air. Meanwhile, on the second-class boat deck by the staircase entrance, a whist tournament that was taking place came to a close. Nora Bretherton of Santa Monica was the winner. She was pregnant and traveling with her 2 children, heading over to visit her parents for the birth of her 3rd child. Second place went to Nellie Houston, an Englishwoman who had spent a year in Chicago. She was awarded a vanity set from Cunard. Nora, as well as one of her children, would end up surviving the forthcoming disaster. However, Nellie would be among the lost. However, remarkably, the handbag of Nellie Houston was recovered in a drift of wreckage, and with it, a remarkable diary letter that she had been writing during the voyage. She had written about the difficulties of climbing into her upper berth, as well as being recognized by a steward from a previous crossing, winning her vanity set, and the slow, dawning anxiety as England drew closer. Her final entry, written the night before the disaster, reads as though it was something that was pulled from a travel memoir. "If it weren't for the danger," she wrote, "it would have been an entirely wonderful crossing." That same day, back in New York, Cunard finally turned over the full cargo manifest to U.S. Customs. The cargo was a strange mix. It contained muskrat skins, bacon, beeswax, machinery from Otis Elevator Company, barrels of beef tongues, 157 barrels of candy, enough to delight every school kid in Liverpool, even a case of oil paintings, accompanying first-class passenger Sir Hugh Lane, an Irish art collector. The manifest made the paintings sound modest, but in truth, the paintings were rumored to include works by Monet, Rubens, and various other famed artists, insured for what would now be worth $92 million US. Also on board were 50 barrels and 94 cases of aluminum powder, plus 50 cases of bronze powder, both of which could ignite under the right conditions. And more controversially, 1,250 cases of artillery shells, produced by Bethlehem Steel, headed for the British Army, which at the time was in desperate need of ammunition. These were inert shrapnel shells, legally allowed under US neutrality laws, for they lacked the fuses and propellant charges, which would be added later in England. Still, the presence of munitions would come to loom large in the aftermath of the forthcoming disaster. And if that weren't enough, Also on board were 4,200 cases of Remington rifle cartridges, or in total, 170 tons of live ammunition. Meanwhile, off the coast of the old head of Kinsale, the German submarine U-20 prowled through the choppy seas and the wispy haze. Just before 5 p.m., Captain Walter Schwieger spotted a ship. At first glance, it appeared as a grand, square-rigged sailing vessel, its 3 masts billowing. It cut a romantic silhouette. But Schwieger wasn't sentimental. He saw a target and ordered U-20 to close in and ready its deck gun. As they got closer, though, he realized that he'd been fooled by the mist. It wasn't a majestic, tall ship. It was a small schooner. The vessel proved to be the Earl of Latham, carrying a load of rocks from Limerick. Schwieger surfaced his submarine, approached the schooner, then signaled the vessel to halt, reverting briefly to cruiser rules. Since there was no risk in naval ships approaching, he had his men board the vessel to inspect her documents and cargo. Schwieger then briefly boarded the Earl of Latham himself to speak with the captain of the schooner, during which he inquired about the cargo and said that he was very sorry that he had to sink the old, beautiful ship, but he could not risk the Royal Navy being contacted. Afterwards, U-20's crew reboarded the submarine, and then the crew of the Earl of Latham abandoned the schooner in her lifeboat, which was filled with rations beforehand. Then, once the crew rowed clear from the schooner, Schwieger finally gave the order to sink her. Shell after shell was fired against the hull of the schooner, all of which making their mark and exploding against the hull. Miraculously, though, she remained afloat. Even a rock-filled schooner, it turned out, did not go down quite so easily. 12 shells were fired into the hull of the schooner over the course of 10 minutes to carry out the task. Afterwards, she finally keeled over and sank silently. Afterwards, Captain Schwieger bid the crew of the Earl of Latham good luck, and then silently took her leave, leaving behind a field of floating wood planks, spars, and rigging, as well as one singular lifeboat containing the crew of the Earl of Latham. That evening, back aboard the Lusitania in second class, the members of the Royal Gwent male voice singers from Wales, who were traveling home after a tour in North America, gave a lengthy concert, followed by a comedy show. In addition to being for entertainment purposes, this was also done primarily as a fundraiser on behalf of the Sailors' Orphanage at Liverpool. Meanwhile, in first class, the ship's band was also giving a concert in the saloon. Many popular tunes were performed by the band that night, including It's a Long Way to Tipperary by John McCormack, as well as I Didn't Raise My Boy to Be a Soldier by Morton Harvey, and various romantic-era musical pieces. By the time the evening's entertainment had finished in first and second class that night, the sun had already completely set. Many of the attendees of both concerts strolled the decks under the starry skies that night, before retiring to her smoking rooms or lounges for the night. As the evening winded down aboard the Lusitania, her passengers slowly retired to their cabins one by one and drifted off to sleep, marking an end to a somewhat anxiety-filled, but otherwise, completely normal day aboard the Lusitania.